Hi anglers, I'm Captain Lance Valentine and welcome to this episode of Teaching Fishing the 8 Steps Breakdown. In tonight's episode, we're going to talk about step number 3, getting your lure to the right depth so it can be effective. Before we go any further though, let's step back a minute and look at what the 8 steps actually are, why we use them, and how they can help you catch more fish. You know, when I started doing seminars about 25 years ago, I needed a way to teach everything I was teaching that my anglers could absorb and put into a system that would help them catch more fish. And I came up with the 8 steps to catching more and bigger fish. Understand that these are listed in order of importance. So number 6 is not relevant until number 1 through 5 are actually figured out. So we're actually working down the list. Let's take just a few minutes to go through what the steps are. Step number 1 is be in the right location. Step number 2 is be in the right depth of water and know how deep the fish are. Step number 3, the focus of tonight's conversation, is how to get your lure at the right depth. Step number 4 is have the right lure speed. Step number 5 is have the right lure size. Step number 6 is the right lure shape. Step number 7, the right lure action. And finally, step number 8 is to have the right lure color. Remember, again, these are listed in order of importance. And tonight we're going to focus on number 3, depth of your lure. What we're trying to do with tonight's seminar is teach you to learn how to know when you're on the water where you can put your baits. What I call the box of death. At what part of the water column do my baits need to be active, aggressive, and catch fish when I'm out on the water? That box of death is important to figure out every day. Some days it may be 5 or 6, 7, 8 feet in width. Sometimes it's only a few inches, maybe a foot where you need to get your baits. It's an important part of the fishing puzzle. Couple conditions before we get started here. Here's some basic thoughts on conditions that mean you're going to have to get your lures very close to the fish. Anytime that fish are close to the bottom, your lure needs to be closer to the fish. Anytime you're dealing with post-frontal conditions, dirty water, fish that are really pressured, fish in heavy current, and anytime you're dealing with night fishing or low light conditions. All of those conditions mean that your bait needs to be closer to the fish because it's harder for them to find it and harder for them to see it. Conversely, some conditions that allow you to put your bait further away from the fish and still get bit are anytime fish are off the bottom, anytime you've got stable weather, and the longer that weather is stable and consistent, the further away from fish you can put your baits. When you're dealing with clean or slightly stained water, fish can see a bait from further away and they can come up and get it. Anytime fish show on your sonar and they are schooled or they show that they're active, they're moving, they're showing marks on your screen that say that they're moving, and they're schooled tightly together, that means they're active and aggressive. You can get baits further away from the fish and still get bit. Anytime you're chasing fish in open water, fish that are chasing open water bait, fish have a tendency to feed up. And anytime you're dealing with clear conditions, clear water and clear skies mean that you can get your baits further away from the fish and still get bit. So we're trying to figure out step number 3, depth of our lure, and know every day exactly how big our box of death is, get all of our baits inside that box of death, and we're going to catch more fish every time we're on the water. Hey, let's take a quick little break and we'll come back to break down all the little pieces of knowing what depth your lure needs to be at. Anytime we're trolling, we're trying to do 2 things. We're trying to figure out what I call the kill zone, or where are the fish in the water. And we're doing that by saving a waypoint every time we catch a fish. So hopefully at some point we'll have a box or a circle where the fish are, and we'll just keep staying in that area and catching fish. The second thing we're trying to do is figure out what I call the box of death, or where do my baits need to run? What is my depth control? What depth they need to be at to catch fish inside that kill zone. So we're trying to find the kill zone by catching fish, seeing them on our sonar and marking waypoints every time we catch one. And then the depth control is to get the box of death. Where in the water column do my baits need to be? We're starting to get zeroed in a little bit. We know now we're starting to catch fish with baits down from about 6 to 12 feet. We got some stuff a little bit deeper, and we're gonna bring one of those in, run it up a little higher, get another different style of lure, different color of lure up at the same depth, stay in our kill zone where the fish are, get a little bit different depth control, a little different lure in the same spot. We should start catching 2 or 3 fish at a time. That is depth control. That is trolling, maximizing your time, fishing where the fish are with lures at the right depth. That's how you catch a bunch of fish every day you're out on the water. Warrior Lures, custom designed and painted spoons, blades, and crankbaits for any species of fish. Check out the complete line of Warrior products, including the new Warrior XL Flutter Spoon, online or at your local tackle retailer. Proudly made in Michigan. Tech Fishing Systems, manufacturer of high-quality mounting track, rod holders, electronics mounts, downriggers, and fishing accessories. Any angler, any species, any boat. Tech Fishing Systems, proudly made in Michigan. Tech Marine, makers of custom-designed transducer mounts and gimbal brackets. Great sonar performance starts with a quality transducer mount, and Tech has a mounting option for any brand on any boat. Tech Marine, making life a little easier on the water. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Don't get caught with a loss to find out you have the wrong insurance for your boat and fishing gear. Contact Bob Llewellyn today for a free checkup of your current coverage. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Anglers insuring anglers. Welcome back to Teaching and Fishing the 8 Steps Breakdown, and tonight we're focusing on depth of lure, step number 3. And here's a few factors that are going to determine how deep your lure needs to be every day you're out fishing on the water. The first one we're going to discuss in detail is how deep the fish actually are and how deep the forage that they're feeding on is. You know, bait fish is a huge part of catching fish. When you look at our 8 steps, all of them tie into bait fish. And depth of your lure also does, because different styles of bait fish or different types of bait fish live in different parts of the water column. So if I'm chasing fish that may be feeding on gizzard shad or shiners, my game fish are going to be closer to the top. My depth of lure is probably going to be in the top part of the water column. Conversely, if fish are feeding on ciscos or smelt, they may be deeper in the water column, and if they're feeding on yellow perch, they may be close to the bottom. So knowing what kind of forage fish that my game fish are chasing is going to help me have a pretty good idea of what part of the water column I'm going to need to target and where I'm probably going to need to get my lures to be effective. Now, once we get on the water, to really dial in the depth of our lure, we need to start using our sonar, because if you notice, step 1 was location. So our sonar here tells us we're in the right place. We have bait and we have game fish. Step 2 is to be in the right depth of water and know how deep the fish are so we know where to put our lures. So using our sonar, like this example here, helps us really determine where we can put our baits. So we've got fish that are up off the bottom. We have a bunch of bait. We know that we have active aggressive fish, and we can probably get our baits a little further away from those fish and be effective. Another great sonar shot shows us that we have multiple fish using multiple different levels. So again, remember, the depth of lure is important to figure out where the fish are actively aggressively feeding. We want to make sure that when we put our lure in the water, we're targeting a depth that is going to draw active, aggressive feeding fish to it, not necessarily be fishing where the inactive fish are. So here's a great sonar shot of inactive fish, a school of bait with fish feeding in it, and game fish that are actually up chasing fish in the top part of the water column. So remember, location, we're in the right location, depth of water and depth of our fish, and now the third step is to figure out exactly where our baits go. Because that is the third step, we have to figure out location and depth of water first before we can put our baits at the right depth. Here's a situation where we actually have walleyes right on the bottom. So again, using our sonar is going to tell us where those fish are and kind of where our baits need to be. And we're going to cover that in just a second, where our baits need to be based on those fish. Remember those general thoughts I gave you in the intro about times we can fish baits further away from game fish and times that we have to fish lures close to game fish. Remember those. Why is this so important? Why do we want to find fish on our sonar first, know where they are before we start determining lure depth? It's critical because fish have a tendency to feed up. If you look at the game fish that we chase, most of them have their eyes high and forward on their head. So if you look at this yellow triangle, this is actually where a fish can see. So if I have a fish that's a couple feet off the bottom and I have, let's go back to our 8 steps. If I'm at the right speed, which is step number 4, I have the right lure size, right lure shape, right lure action, and right lure color, but my depth is wrong, I put my lure down here, chances are pretty good that fish isn't going to be able to see it and bite it. So that's why we have lure depth after we're in the right location, after we know how deep our fish are, which is step 2. Step 3 is to put our lures at the right depth. That's absolutely critical. That's why our 8 steps are listed the way they are, and depth of lure is step number 3. Because having the right lure too deep is never going to catch any fish. So understand how fish see, where they feed, how they eat, and that most game fish, most of the time, feed up. That's an important part of this puzzle when we talk about how deep we need to put our lures. Okay? Hopefully that helps you. Again, I can't stress enough, use your sonar. We have some great seminars on sonar to understand what you're actually seeing here. But again, remember, step 1 is location, so we know we're in the right location. Step 2 is to be in the right depth of water, know how deep the fish are. And then step 3 is where we put our baits. Okay? And remember, fish have a tendency to feed up because they can't see anywhere below the middle of their eye. That's an important part of this puzzle to remember. Okay, let's take a real quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to dig deeper into this and talk about exactly where to put the box of death based on how the fish are positioned on our sonar. Warrior Lures, custom designed and painted spoons, blades, and crankbaits for any species of fish. Check out the complete line of Warrior products, including the new Warrior XL Flutter Spoon, online or at your local tackle retailer. Proudly made in Michigan. Traxtech Fishing Systems, manufacturer of high-quality mounting track, rod holders, electronics mounts, downriggers, and fishing accessories. Any angler, any species, any boat. Traxtech Fishing Systems, proudly made in Michigan. Rytech Marine, makers of custom-designed transducer mounts and gimbal brackets. Great sonar performance starts with a quality transducer mount, and Rytech has a mounting option for any brand on any boat. Rytech Marine, making life a little easier on the water. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Don't get caught with a loss to find out you have the wrong insurance for your boat and fishing gear. Contact Bob Llewellyn today for a free checkup of your current coverage. Worldwide Marine Insurance. Anglers insuring anglers. Fishhawk Electronics, providing lure speed and water temperature at any depth. Featuring hardwired models X4 and X4D and the new portable X2, anglers can have the Fishhawk advantage anywhere they fish. Trolling without a Fishhawk is simply called boating. Max Lure, the original since 1969. Catch more fish with the wedding ring spinner, smile blade, double D Dodger, flashlight attractor, and more. Max Lures, a legacy of innovation for 50 years. Macklin Heating and Cooling, experts in the installation, maintenance, and service of home comfort systems. Family owned and operated in mid-Michigan for 50 years, Macklin Heating and Cooling, where your comfort matters to us.
ProCure Bait Scents, manufacturer of high-quality bait scents, cures, and dyes. Made with whole fresh bait, ProCure scents perfectly mimic what fish eat every day. ProCure, helping anglers worldwide catch more big fish.
Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Captain Lance Valentine, and tonight we are doing the Teaching Fishing 8 Steps breakdown, talking about step number 3, your lure depth. And the second factor that determines how deep your lures need to be every day is the water clarity. Water clarity is a huge part of the lure depth puzzle. I deal mostly with walleye, and walleye have a tendency to not hit a bait unless they can see it. Bass, pike, some other fish have a tendency to actually be able to feel a bait or hear a bait, and they will go strike it. The fish that I chase the most, walleyes, they have a tendency to not want to do that. They want to be able to see the lure before they actually bite it. So water clarity is a huge part of knowing how deep I can put my baits every day. We call this the visual zone of awareness. Depending on water color, water clarity, how far can a fish see and how far will he come to actually hit a bait. So you'll notice we've got dirty water, stained water, and clear water. And as the water changes clarity, you can put your baits further and further and further away from that fish. So in dirty water situations, we need to get our baits fairly close to the fish. In stained water situations, we can get our baits a little further away, but still need to be fairly close. And in clear water, especially clear cold water, we can get our baits way away from the fish, and they're still going to come and get it. Remember, when you have a school of fish, only so many fish in that school are active and aggressive. What you want to do is get those fish out of the school first. So by running your baits higher than you think you should, you're going to get those very aggressive fish to come out of the school. You can catch those without them fighting in the school and scaring the school or scaring the school. You can get more fish out of a pot of fish. That's an important part of this puzzle. But understand how dirty water, stained water, and clear water works. For my purposes, I use a very, very simple formula to determine if the water is clear, stained, or dirty. I just look over the back of my boat and see if I can see my prop or my cavitation plate. If the water is clear enough for me to see my prop, I call it clear water. If I can't see my prop, but I can see my cavitation plate on my engine very well, I call it stained water. And if I look over the back of the boat and can't see either my prop or my cavitation plate, I'm in dirty water. And each one of those is going to determine exactly where I put my baits or where I feel comfortable that I can figure out where the box of death is. Let's go back to our sonar pictures, talk about them in detail, and show you where the box of death would be in each of those sonar pictures. So here we have a great picture. We have lots of bait up top, grouped tightly together, which tells us it's being fed on. We have walleyes down here in open water. They're about halfway up the bottom. They are active and aggressive chasing this bait. In a situation like this, I could probably run baits. These fish are down about 21 feet. I could probably put baits anywhere from 8 to 15, 18, maybe even 20 feet deep and catch some fish. I would be very comfortable in this situation having my baits only 10, 11, 12 feet deep and still be able to bring these active, aggressive, schooled up fish up way, way away from where they are to actually get bit. This happens a lot in clear water and it happens a lot in cold water. So if you're fishing cold, clear water, don't hesitate to put your baits 8, 10, 12 feet above the fish. Believe me, they will come up and get it. Here's another example we showed you earlier. This is a situation where we have fish down here that are inactive, fish here that are actually in a school of bait. We don't want to fish there because it's hard to get our lures to compete with real bait. But here are some fish up top that are actually feeding up high in the water column. Again, I would be comfortable running my baits about 2 to 10 feet above these fish. Not as far above them as here, because in this situation the water is colder. Here was more of a little bit late summer bite as opposed to a fall bite. The water's a little bit warmer, low 50s. I would be a little bit closer, but still I want to be above the fish for sure. Remember that cone of vision we showed you earlier. I want to be above them, but I'm going to be a little bit closer than I would in that colder, clear water in this picture here. So again, that box of death will change based on those factors. Lastly, the last picture we showed you was these walleyes that were actually inactive laying on the bottom. In that situation, my bait needs to be right on top of those fish. So deep diving crankbaits, maybe even a crawler harness on a bottom bouncer right close to the bottom. I may even stop and jig right on the bottom. But notice that our box of death gets smaller and gets closer to the fish as they're on the bottom and inactive, up in the middle part of the water column and a little bit active, and way up in the water column in cold water and really active. So that's an important part of that. Water clarity, fish activity level, and water temperature are going to give you an idea of how high you can run your baits and where your box of death should actually be. Okay? Hopefully that helps you dial in on an important factor of depth of lure. Let's take one more break and we're going to come back and break down depth control options and how you can get your lure to the right depth. Fishhawk Electronics, providing lure speed and water temperature at any depth. Featuring hardwired models X4 and X4D and the new portable X2, anglers can have the Fishhawk advantage anywhere they fish. Trolling without a fishhawk is simply called boating. Max Lure, the original since 1969. Catch more fish with the wedding ring spinner, smile blade, double D Dodger, flashlight attractor, and more. Max Lures, a legacy of innovation for 50 years. Macklin Heating and Cooling, experts in the installation, maintenance, and service of home comfort systems. Family owned and operated in mid-Michigan for 50 years, Macklin Heating and Cooling, where your comfort matters to us.
Procure Bait Sense, manufacturer of high-quality bait scents, cures, and dyes. Made with whole fresh bait, Procure scents perfectly mimic what fish eat every day. Procure, helping anglers worldwide catch more big fish.
Welcome back, anglers. We are here to wrap up our discussion tonight about step number 3 of our 8 steps to catching more and bigger fish, which is lure depth. We've already discussed the first 2 factors, how deep the fish are and water clarity, and now we're going to talk about depth control options. Once you figure out where the fish are, step number 1, how deep they are, step number 2, and you know where you put your lures, you have to have a way to get your lures to that depth and keep them there. Couple different types of lures you're going to use, and we're going to talk very, very general here. We have other seminars that cover all of this in detail. We'll show you how to get those in just a second. But for tonight, we're just going to kind of go real quick through your options for fishing and how to get them to the right depth. So let's start with one of my favorite ways to fish, which is crankbaits, on-weighted crankbaits, just flatline crankbaits. These catch a lot of fish of all species. They're one of my favorite ways to catch walleye. They come in different sizes, shape, actions, colors are limitless. Some lures have a very soft, subtle action, some have a very, very aggressive action. So we can determine what the fish want by picking a crankbait and give them lots of different options. Getting crankbaits to the right depth is pretty easy. I use an app called Precision Trolling Data, and what it allows me to do is pick the lure I'm going to use, dial in or select how deep I want that lure to run, and it's going to tell me how many feet of line I need out to get that lure to that depth. Absolutely critical. If it's tested on the water, it's a great way to know your lures are exactly at the right depth. Now, before I go any further, we have lots of seminars on basic trolling, advanced depth control, how to use the right rods, reels, line, and calibrate your line counters for trolling. Those are other seminars. We're not going to cover those tonight because tonight we're just breaking down that third step of our 8 steps, getting your lures to the right depth. So I want to give you a basic idea of depth control, but if you want to dig into it, we have seminars available at Teaching Fishing. So that's how crankbait works. Next thing you can do, maybe you want to get those crankbaits a little bit deeper, we can take a crankbait and add what we call an offshore tackle snap weight. So by using a 2-ounce snap weight in front of the lure, we can actually get that lure a little bit deeper. And again, by changing the line type on our Precision Trolling app, we can now figure out that we need to get 10 feet deep with that same lure. We can go a little bit faster and we can let 40 feet of line out, and we can actually get that lure with a snap weight in front of it down to a little bit deeper depth. So if we're going to go faster, we can get lures down where they need to be. Or if we're going to want to get deeper with a smaller crankbait that doesn't dive as deep, the ability to use a crankbait with a 2-ounce offshore tackle snap weight lets us get that lure down there. And again, that information is on the Precision Trolling Data app. A lot of us, especially walleye fishermen, we fish lures that are unweighted. They don't weigh anything. They don't have a diving lip. So for example, warrior flutter spoons or little warrior spoons, crawler harnesses, those are very, very popular in the walleye world. So we need some way to get them down to depths that we need to fish. Sometimes we fish those as deep as 40, 50, 60 feet. How do we get them down there? So the third depth control option is diving devices. And that could be inline weights, snap weights, lead core line, jet divers, diver disc, one of my favorites, the offshore tackle, tadpole. Any of those devices in front of your lure will take your lure down to the depth that you need to get it to get into that box of death and get some bites. All right? And again, all those diving devices have a dive curve on the Precision Trolling Data app. I want to get this tadpole down 12 feet. I let out 16 feet of line. I've got my lure exactly where it needs to be. I am in that box of death and I'm catching a lot of fish. If you are a troller, check out our friends at precisiontrollingdata.com. There's lots of different ways to get this information, either individual lures, a lifetime subscription, or stickers for your tackle boxes. Great way to have this information. You need this if you want to learn how to control your depth and get your lures to the right depth. It's absolutely critical. Okay? All right, let's go back to our 8 steps before we wrap up here. Remember, in order of importance, be in the right location, know how deep a water you're in and how deep the fish are. Tonight we talked about how to get your lures to the right depth, some factors to think about, water clarity, how deep the fish are, certain conditions, and depth control options, get your lure to the right depth. In our next episode, we're going to talk about lure speed, and later in the year, we're going to cover lure size, lure shape, lure action, lure color. We're going to break down each one of these 8 steps. If you liked what you saw tonight or you want more information, maybe you want to watch some of those trolling seminars, check out teachinfishing.com. Go to our brand new website. When you're there, go to the top of the page and fill out your information. Give us your email address to get signed up for our monthly newsletter. You'll get a newsletter full of information, discounts, deals, everything that's going on at Teaching Fishing. Lots of things to get, great information to get on that newsletter. But when you're there, check out Teaching Fishing TV, our TV network. Go to the guide in the upper right-hand corner and you will see a channel guide come across the bottom of the screen. Lots of seminars playing. Some months we have trolling seminars, some months we have sonar seminars, some months we have weed walleye seminars, river fishing seminars. Lots of things going on Teaching Fishing TV. Please check it out. And that's where you're going to find some of the seminars on trolling, crankbait fishing, spoon fishing, more detail on depth control devices. That's going to be on the Teaching Fishing TV. Also, while you're on the website, check out our subscription service so you can get more detailed seminars. You can get live stream seminars that we provide, and some of the classes and events that we offer are going to be available to our subscription service members before they open to the general public. Click on the subscription service box, and it'll give you all the details. If you have any questions about what we covered tonight, we are going to be live doing a Q&A on the Teachin' Fishin' Facebook page, facebook.com, Teachin' Fishin', Teachin' Fishin' Facebook page. We'll be live May 26th at 7:30 p.m. to do a live Q&A on this seminar. So if you have questions, feel free to get a hold of us. Join us for that live Q&A. Bring your questions, and we'll make sure we get them answered for you. All right, we're about ready to wrap up here. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you need to get a hold of us, again, teachinfishin.com is our website, facebook.com, Teachin' Fishin', or the Teachin' Fishin' Facebook page. And if you need to get a hold of us or have any questions, please feel free to send us an email at teachinfishin@gmail.com. Folks, thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Captain Lance Valentine. I hope you enjoyed our breakdown of step number 3 of our 8 steps, how to get your lure to the right depth. We'll see you on the water.